Centuries followed, centuries after the Ark of Atrahasis had landed on the slopes of Mount Ararat. The echo of the Great Flood resonated in the narratives of successive generations, shaping their worldview and their place in it. Cities rose again on the Mesopotamian plains, but the memory of the 5 cities, the Antediluvian Atrahasis, swallowed by the waters, remained alive, a constant warning against the arrogance and forgetfulness of the gods. The figure of Atrahasis, elevated to the rank of hero and protector of humanity, it became a focal point for the reconstruction, not only physical, but also spiritual, of civilization. Its descendants strove to honor its wisdom and to preserve the account of the cataclysm, transmitting it orally from generation to generation. The singers and narrators became crucial figures, repositories of the memory of a lost world, and keepers of the lessons learned from its destruction. The hope of rediscovering the tablets of antediluvian wisdom never completely died out. Legends told of places where the wise men had hidden their archives, so some adventurer or scholar ventured into the desolate lands in search of these lost treasures. It was said that in Sippar, the city of the sun, the tablets lay buried, containing the knowledge of the world before the flood. The story of Oannes and the 7 Apkallu transformed into a myth, enriching itself with details and symbolic meanings. They were remembered not only as the founders of civilization, but also as intermediaries between the divine and human world, bringer of law, art, and science. Their image of beings half man and half fish, as described by Berossus, it became iconic, representing their mysterious origin and their profound wisdom. In other lands, echoes of similar cataclysms were preserved in oral traditions and sacred texts. Native Americans recounted great floods that had disrupted their world, often linked to celestial signs and sudden climate changes. Their stories of seers that they escaped the destruction, and the survivors who sought refuge in the mountains recalled the experiences of Atrahasis and his family. In Egypt, the memory of a primordial age of the gods and of a submerged island homeland was preserved in the texts of Edfu. The priests handed down tales of navigator deities who, after a great cataclysm, had dispersed throughout the world to found new sacred places. The figure of the celestial serpent that had destroyed their island resonated with narratives of divine wrath and global destruction present in other cultures. The notion of the earth of destruction and rebirth found a powerful expression in the myth of the phoenix, the sacred bird that was reborn from its own ashes after a determined period of life, symbolized the capacity of world to regenerate after the catastrophe, bringing a message of hope and renewal. Its connection with Heliopolis, an ancient Egyptian religious center, underlined the importance of preserving a knowledge and to begin new eras after moments of crisis. With the passing of millennia, the search for the origins of civilization and the causes of great cataclysms continued to fascinate scholars and essays. In Mesopotamia, kings like Assurbanipal boasted of accessing writings on stone that predate the flood, suggesting the persistence, albeit fragmentary, of an ancient written legacy. In Egypt, the legend of the Books of Thoth fueled the hope of rediscovering the lost wisdom of the primordial age. It was said that these texts contain the secrets of the universe and the divine projects for the creation and rebirth of the world. Their presumed location near Giza and Memphis connected this research to the mystery of the great monuments like the Sphinx and the pyramids. The dating of the Giza monuments around 500 BC through astronomical alignment and erosion suggested the existence of sophisticated knowledge in a very remote era. The idea that the possibility that the monuments could be part of a book descended from heaven containing a message for future generations fueled speculation about a lost civilization and the transmission of knowledge through time. The mystery of Baalbek, with its megalithic blocks of incredible size, offered another testimony of advanced engineering capabilities in a dark past. The connections with the Phoenicians and the possibly even more ancient roots raised questions about the antediluvian maritime civilizations and their influence on subsequent cultures. The story of J. Harlan Bretz and his struggle for the acceptance of the theory of a catastrophic flood in the North American scablands provided an example of how ideas that challenge established paradigms encounter resistance. Its stubborn defense of field tests, despite the skepticism of the scientific community, reflected the difficulty of accepting catastrophic events as significant forces in the history of the planet. The cometary impact theory of the Younger Dryas offered a possible scientific explanation for the cataclysms that seem to be remembered in myths throughout the world. The idea that a giant comet might have fragmented and struck the Earth about 12,800 years ago, causing floods, sudden climate changes, and the end of an ice age, provided a scientific evidence for ancient narratives of global destruction. Sites like Göbekli Tepe, with its engravings that some scholars interpret as astronomical and cosmological representations dating back to over 11,000 years ago, suggested the presence of a sophisticated understanding of the cosmos in an era considered prehistoric. Its proximity to the Ararat region, where according to the Mesopotamian tradition and biblical writings where the Ark landed, strengthened the hypothesis of a connection between this ancient knowledge and the memory of the flood. The figure of Enoch, the antediluvian patriarch who walked with God, and that he was mysteriously taken away, became associated with secret knowledge and prophetic visions. The Book of Enoch, with its accounts of heavenly watchers who descended on the earth and brought knowledge to humanity, offered a further perspective on the possible origins of antediluvian knowledge and its transmission to subsequent cultures. The link between the Guardians and the Apkallu underlined the potential universality of these civilizing figures in ancient traditions. The legacy of the waters, therefore, was not only a memory of destruction, but also a deposit site of knowledge, myths and symbols that had traveled through time, influencing successive civilizations in profound and often unexpected ways. The desire to understand the past, to give the sense of cataclysms and of recovering lost wisdom, continued to push humanity in its search for meaning in connection with its most remote roots. In more recent times, the study of ancient Mesopotamian and Egyptian texts offered new perspectives on the narrative of the flood and on the civilizations that preceded it. The translation of the Epic of Gilgamesh and other Sumerian tales, he revealed surprising similarities with the story of Noah in the Bible, suggesting a common origin for these traditions. Similarly, the study of the Edfu texts opened windows onto an era of Demen, Tikata di, constructor gods, and of a primordial homeland destroyed. The recognition that the biblical account of the flood was not original to the Old Testament, but had been taken from Mesopotamian sources, strengthened the idea of a shared cultural heritage dating back to a remote past. The 5 antediluvian cities mentioned in the Sumerian texts, swallowed by the flood, became symbols of a lost civilization whose memory persisted in the later traditions of the Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians. The belief that the traditional history of Mesopotamia was completely divided into 2 periods, before and after the flood, and that both were considered real events by the ancient inhabitants of the region, underlined the depth and pervasiveness of the impact of this cataclysm on their collective conscience. Even the Egyptian traditions, with their references to an era preceding the First Dynasty and to a sacred archive that narrated the story of Atlantis, suggested the awareness of civilizations preceding the official chronology. The destruction of the Temple of Sai, where Plato stated that Solon had learned the history of Atlantis, represents the loss of a potential source of knowledge about the remote past. The echo of the past, therefore, continued to resonate through the millennia, fragmented into myths, legends, and archaeological discoveries. This suggested a history of humanity much more complex and ancient than had long been believed. The search for this lost heritage remained a fascinating challenge, an invitation to reconsider, to unearth our origins and our relationship with the cataclysms that have shaped our planet. Perhaps, as the legend of Thoth's book suggested, the time to fully understand this because wisdom had not yet arrived. But the traces left by the antediluvian civilizations, the echoes of the great floods, and the stories of the wise civilizers continue to whisper through time, inviting to listen carefully to the legacy of the waters. And while modern humanity faced new global challenges, the memory of past cataclysms and the lessons learned from the survivors offered a precious perspective on our vulnerability and on the necessity of preserving knowledge, wisdom, and respect for the fragile balance of our world. The echo of the past. Moving from being a simple historical curiosity, it remained a warning and an inspiration for the future. The end.